So let's look at project management. Now, integration is the knowledge area where we bring everything together. Integration is the knowledge area where we bring the resources, the processes, the plans, the knowledge, everything is brought together in integration. And this is a very important area because if integration is well done, it means our project will run very smoothly because integration is the glue that brings all the knowledge areas together. Think about an engine, right? If an engine is put together very well, you find out there's no problem. Why? Because everything is supporting, all the systems are supporting each other. But if while they're putting an engine together, they made a mistake in just one area, it could affect the entire engine. I remember there was a time when uh, I think I had to top up the gas of my AC of my car. I topped up the gas of the AC of my car, maybe 3 weeks. And I was driving a couple of weeks after that, and I noticed that the uh, I noticed that my the AC was not cooling. I was like, I just fixed this thing. Why? Maybe I hope my gas is not leaking or something. Only for my eyes to see the temperature of the car. There's this temperature gauge on the dashboard. Only for my eyes to just see it and see that the engine was piping hot. So I immediately parked the car because I didn't want to buy another engine. I immediately parked the car and allowed the engine to cool down. And afterwards, I I poured water into the water. That's why the car was overheating. And then I started driving the car again. And I put on the AC and it was working perfectly. So you can see that one system in my car, which was the temperature of the car, affected the air conditioning. And that's how projects are. Projects are made up of many moving parts. There's scope management, there's schedule management, the cost management, there's quality. And if those things are not properly planned and put together, you'll find out that one of those areas can affect your project. It could be that we didn't do budgeting well. So because we didn't do budgeting well, the project is being delayed because there's not enough funds, or we did not schedule properly. So because we didn't schedule properly, we have to spend more money. So many things. So integration is that knowledge area where everything is fused together and made a whole. Definition of integration is adding up to make a whole. So this is where we bring all the knowledge areas together. Now, it's been my practice since I started training this course to take integration last. Now, you wonder why. The reason is simple. Integration brings everything together. So why don't we go go through it last when we've looked at every other thing else? For example, why not go through scope management to stakeholder engagement, which is the other 9 knowledge areas before coming into integration. And that's what we're going to do, so that when we look at the parts that make up your project, integration, it will be easier to understand what we're integrating together. So based on that, we're actually going to skip this knowledge area. But there's one thing we cannot skip in this knowledge area, and that is how to develop the project charter. Now, why can't we skip this? Because the project charter is the very first thing you do in your project. The project charter is the very first thing that is done. So we can't skip it because every knowledge area makes reference to it. So what we're going to do is make an exception for this process. So we're going to do this process first, and then we will now jump to scope management. We will not take the other processes, that should follow it. So that's the plan. So let's talk about how the project charter is created, and then we will now go into scope management. So let's look at some key concepts in integration.
All right, okay. I'm so sorry. I just want to ask a question. If you can take us back, just that last slide you showed. Sorry.
Okay.
I just wanted to know that, so these 10 knowledge areas are the ones that we said have 49 processes each, right?
Well,
They
not
have
49 processes
not 49
altogether.
all
That's
together.
where all the 49 processes come from.
Okay, so these ones have different number of processes, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. They all combined, they have 49 processes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
not just
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome. So let's look at how the develop project charter process works. And we're looking at key concepts here. Integration is the sole responsibility of the project manager. Integration is one of the reasons why you are there. Making sure that every part of your project is brought together and aligned. That's the sole responsibility of the project manager. And unfortunately, you can delegate integration to any other specialist. And what we mean by that is that, take for example, cost knowledge area. You can delegate that to an accountant because they're specialists in managing money, even on projects. For risk, we can look for a risk expert and delegate risk management to that. So which means there could be other experts handling some knowledge areas for you while you focus on integration management. And if you don't have those experts or specialists, then it's your job to ensure that you also manage the other knowledge areas. But there's a possibility to handle the other knowledge areas, especially if the project is not a large one, right? But if it is, then they are likely, and depending on the size of the organization, they are likely going to involve they are likely going to involve specialists depending on the size of your organization and size of the project. Now, projects are integrative and iterative in nature. So what do we mean by integrative and iterative in nature? Now, for you to do one thing in a project, you have to consult several areas. So for you to create a budget, you need to, first of all, know the scope of work. So we need to look at scope. Secondly, we need to look at how long the tasks are going to take, right? in areas where you're paying people per day, you have to know how many days you're going to pay them for. If you're paying them per hour, that's also there. So the schedule is important. The resources that you're also going to assign to those tasks, you have to know them. So the quality standards, and the quality standards also drives the type of materials or resources you're going to use. Then if you're going to outsource some part of the project, procurement is also there. Now, I've mentioned like 6 knowledge areas just because I want to talk about budgeting. That is the integrative nature of projects, because before you can plan in one area, you often need other areas as reference. So projects are integrative and iterative. Iterative means that we may have to, maybe we've planned the budget and then we start planning another knowledge area, and then we now see reasons why we need to spend some more money in a particular area. We can come back and elaborate the budget because now we know a bit more. So projects are integrative and iterative in nature. And I think I've explained what integrative means. You have to consult many parts in order to plan one area. So let's talk about the develop project charter process. What is the project charter? The project charter is the area we provide foundational information. The project charter is like the foundation of your project. And of course, the how well the foundation of any building is determines the one of the one of the one of the signs of quality is how well the foundation of the building is. So the project charter is a foundational document that gives the project manager enough information to go ahead to do detailed planning. In other words, the project charter is a high-level plan that helps us to start the project, right? That's why in some industries, the project charter is often called brief. So what's the project brief? You might have heard that maybe in the architectural or construction space was a project brief, or in advertising. I think I've heard that. Okay, so what's the advertising brief? It's just a summary. What's the summary of the project? That's what the project charter is. And the process of creating that charter is called develop project charter. So the project charter is a document that is signed by the sponsor, right, or senior management. If it's an internal project, it's going to be signed by the sponsor or a senior manager within the organization, and that is usually the case. But is usually signed by the sponsor, right? All right. Now, the project charter gives the project manager the authority to use organizational resources. The project manager knows the resources they have access to within the organization for the sake of the project. It's stated in the project charter. The project charter establishes a direct relationship between the project and the organization's strategic objectives. In other words, when you're reading the project charter, you will see how the project objectives align with the strategic objectives, right? The project charter develops a formal record of the project and demonstrates the organization's commitment to the initiative. It demonstrates the organization's commitment. It creates a formal record, which means the project charter can be archived and demonstrate the organization's commitment. So there are 4 useful things, and there are more than 4, but just in summary. Number 1, it provides the project manager with the authority level. Remember when we started and we were talking about organization structure, we were always talking about the authority level of the project manager. The project charter states that authority in terms of the resources they have access to. If you are the project manager and you don't have authority, it means that the resources they give to you can do how they like. So it states the authority level. 2, it shows how project objectives, align with business objectives. 3, it's a document that can be recorded and referenced in the future. 4, any organization that takes the pain to create the project charter is definitely serious or committed to that project charter. I remember a lady, I think um, I mentioned her in this class. She just got a job as a PM and she needed some support, right? So she contacted me, and it was our very first project. Creating a project charter took 3 months, 3 or 4 months, right? Now, you can't spend 3 or 4 months of working every day just to create a project charter, and then you say the organization is not interested in it. Those 3 or 4 months that she spent developing the project charter involved several meetings with stakeholders, clarifying the project goals and objectives and high-level requirements and so on. Now, if the organization now ignores the project, they've just wasted money paying the project manager, right, for something they're not interested in. So it's a serious thing. The project charter is important because that's the launching pad for which the project starts. Now, welcome to ITTOs. Now you just be wondering, what does ITTO mean? It stands for Inputs, Tools and Techniques, and Outputs. This is how every process is presented in the PMBOK 6th edition. The inputs are the artifacts. Remember yesterday, we said that project documents are called artifacts, right? So everything here is more or less a document or a way of doing something, which is the tools and techniques, right? And then we need the output. So inputs are the documents that you need or artifacts you need to reference to carry out the process. Tools and techniques are how we use the inputs and translate them to what we want, which is the output. So if you can look at the output, you can see project charter. That's what we want. But how is it created? We move through the ITTOs. So for you to create a project charter, what do you need? First of all, we need business documents. And what are the business documents? The business case and the benefits management plan. And I'm sure we know what these two mean. The business case and the benefits management plan. The business case and the benefits management plan, right? Of course, the business case explains the why, the justification. The benefits management plan helps us to track benefits when the project starts and even after the project has been completed. So these are 2 documents that you may need to start your project. The second item here is agreement. Now, the project can come as a result of a contract being awarded to your organization, and therefore, we are actually executing the contract, right? So, contract agreement can be an input if the project is coming as a result of a contract, right? And agreements can also be SLAs, service level agreements, MOUs, memorandum of understanding, MOA, memorandum of agreement, right? Agreements are also part of the things that make up project charter. Then we have enterprise environmental factors. This is where we have to consider things like government policies, government standards in the area of the project that we need to also factor in. We are always working in an environment, external and internal environment, right? So you also have to factor that. Remember, enterprise environmental factors influence your project and you cannot ignore them, right? So government policies, so if it's a road construction project, we have to look at government policies as regarding road construction and factor that into the work we're doing. Then organization process assets is also another input. In this area, it could mean that we are looking at historical information and lessons learned from past projects that can help us in planning our current project better. Organization process assets is also where we get templates. Now, remember, we said that organization process assets are the knowledge basis of your project, of your organization, your knowledge basis. And what that means is that it's more or less where you archive all your project documents. So you can easily draft or get templates that you can use for other projects in organization process assets. So the organization can develop standardized templates from past project documents and use them for your more recent work, more recent project documents. And one of the things that you can get on the organization process assets is a project charter template. So you can use a template to create the project charter. So let's look at tools and techniques. Tools and techniques are the how-to. How do we, with all the documents that we have, how do we convert them into the project charter? And an expert can help us. An expert is someone that has an individual or a group that has understanding of the application area or industry that the project is currently in. So someone that is knowledgeable about the industry or the project, someone that has past experience about that project can help us. So we are going to see in some processes expert judgment. An expert judgment simply means you are consulting people that have knowledge and experience, and that is also part of project management. Remember, project management is the application of knowledge. You can get knowledge from experts on this. Expert judgment can also mean that you're consulting a more experienced project manager to create your project charter. Data gathering. So data gathering and if you look at the way it's numbered, you have data gathering, then you now see brainstorming, focus groups. These are things under data gathering. So number one under data gathering is brainstorming. So brainstorming means that your team can brainstorm on what you need to include in the project charter. So brainstorming means, okay, we have to include this information. It's important, and we can, you know, your team can decide, okay, this also needs to be in the project charter. And that's why templates are good. Templates are good because they already show all the sections you need to include. And I'm also going to be sharing a template, a project charter template with us this evening so that you can go through it and understand and see what a project charter looks like. So you can brainstorm. Brainstorming helps us to identify the key deliverables, the project description, right? Key high level requirements, right? So we can brainstorm on those things. Focus group discussions can help us to look at the assumptions and high level risk in the project. We can interview subject matter experts to to help us also in the high level requirements for the project and use data gathering to get information about the elements that make up the project charter. Now, interpersonal and team skills includes conflict management. Now, when there are many stakeholders on a project, you need conflict management. Why? Because you want to execute a project and there are several interests in that project. So conflict management means that we are able to resolve conflict as soon as it happens in the process of developing your project charter. Now, back to the lady I mentored in Canada that was working on our first project. Our first project was a tricky one. Our first project involved two departments that came together to execute one project. In fact, at the beginning of the project, they were saying that let's see if they can merge the two projects together because they were asking for similar things. And the PMO, based on the number of project managers they had, they were saying that let's just merge them. In the very first meeting she had with stakeholders, two departments needed a software, and two departments got the funding. They got funding separately, right? There was the uh, policy making department, and there was can I remember the other department? Let's say policy making, uh, policy management department, and what's the other department? Two departments, right, came together. And they had the meeting, and she was asking them what their expectations were, this and that. The one of the representatives from there were just two people representing the two different departments, and the meeting started, and one of them was just talking. This is what we're going to be needing. This is what we're going to be needing. This is what we're going to be needing, and she was very vocal, right? Right, just stated. And it wasn't as if anything bad happened. The other one didn't really talk much. So later on, she drafted a project charter and sent it to both of them to confirm that it aligned with their requirements. The department whose representative didn't talk much rejected most of the work, that it doesn't align with what they want. And guess what? That was the department bringing about 80, 80 to 90 something percent of the fund. They had more money. So, so when that happened, I just told her that look, you have to do conflict management because it's clear when one person is not talking in a meeting and the other one is just going, it's not as if they had issues before, but that was a clear case where she had to apply conflict management and say, okay, let's try. And they had other meetings and they resolved, the issue, and they could capture requirements. And in subsequent meetings, they leaned more to the department that was providing more of the funding, but also ensured that department that did not provide as much funding was carried along. So it's a skill, it's a technique. Conflict management is important, especially when you have projects that involve different stakeholder interests. You may have to resolve conflict. You might have to manage conflict so that everybody is on the same page. Facilitation is more or less where the project manager ensures that every stakeholder comes together to express uh, you know, their requirements, their needs on the project. Facilitation simply means you are helping to collaborate with other stakeholders so that we can draw out the requirements. Then we have meeting management techniques. Now, in creating a project charter, you're going to have several meetings. It's not usually, depending on the size of the project, it might have, you may have to have several meetings, several revisions, and that's what we're saying. So meetings and meeting management techniques. So for each meeting or for your meetings in general, you need to apply meeting management techniques. And what are meeting management techniques? Things like creating an agenda before the meeting starts, distributing the agenda, following the agenda, creating action points, and so that technique of being able to manage meetings is what we're referring to as meeting management. So that for the number of meetings you need to have, which is number 4, we can organize and manage them if we're using meeting management techniques. And your meetings are more organized and productive. So at the end of the day, what do we want? It is the project charter and something called the assumptions log. Now, the assumptions log are the assumptions that you have made concerning the project. And at the beginning of the project, these are the assumptions and constraints that have strategic relevance to your project. Assumptions log is very important because if assumptions change in your project, it can actually mean that you may have to stop the project. It might. So it's good to identify the assumptions early in your project. So let me give an example. Let's say we're executing a project in Nigeria that requires external resources from the US. Now, I can make an assumption that the exchange rate will not go beyond a certain amount of money. So the exchange rate will not go beyond 1,800, worst case scenario, to a dollar. That's an assumption I'm making. So imagine we start a project and then exchange rate goes above 1,800, right? So the assumption, so that means that we may have to, we may have to validate the project again if assumptions change. And that's why you need the assumptions log. So you keep all the assumptions so that from time to time, if assumptions change, we may have to revalidate the project. Now, if there's no charter, there's no project. What does that mean? In some organizations, when we create the project charter, we, based on best practices, that is what defines the project. So no charter, no project, right? The charter gives us the information, basic information we need to go ahead into detailed planning. When signed off, the project charter gives the project life and is a document which states the main details of the project. So what does it include? It will include information of the scope, description of the project, the deliverables, the authority level of the project manager, you can see it, the constraints and assumptions, stakeholder definition and level of influence, time and cost goals. So you can see scope, time, and cost has to be stated in the project charter at a high level. Organizational information that is relevant, and project justification. Where does project justification come from in the project charter? It comes from the business case, which means the reason why the project is being executed. So a charter has the following characteristics. One, it gives the project life. Life means direction. It includes the high-level scope of the project, plus any constraints or assumptions with time and cost goals. It provides the project manager with the authority to use resources within the organization. It includes the business need or reason that the project was undertaken to address. It's issued by a manager external to the project at a level appropriate to the needs of the project. So we're actually referring to senior management because it has to be at a level appropriate, a level where there's support and, there can be support. So it has to be at a higher level than the project manager's level, senior management, for example. It's usually signed by senior management or the sponsor, but we should focus more on the sponsor signing the document and should be a physical document, right? So these are the things that make up the project charter. Let's look at additional information that the project charter should include. The project charter should include the project purpose, measurable project objectives, and related success criteria. Yeah, Sean, you have a question?
Yes, I do. I just quickly, I know you said the business case is like a reference. We needed to make the project charter. So who prepares the business case?
So ideally, the business case can be handled by business development or business analyst in your organization. Yeah. Or someone in the PMO prepares. The business case is usually, depending on the size of the organization, it's usually the business analyst. But business development can also create the business case. And sometimes the project manager, depending on how much knowledge they have or experience, also created. But usually it's more of a BA function, business analyst function, right? Depends on the
Thank you.
organization.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So, high-level requirements, the high-level project description, boundaries, and key deliverables, the overall project risk. Overall project risk. So that means you should have high-level risk being stated in your project, in the project charter. Summary milestone schedule. This is where we state the milestone dates for certain deliverables in our project. Pre-approved financial resources. This is talking about a high-level budget. So in the project chapter, your high-level budget should be stated. And then key stakeholder list. Now, the project charter should also include project approval requirements. And this is where we know what success is, who decides the project is successful, and who signs off on the project. So we state, how they're going to approve, what must be involved for the project to be successful, and who is the person that will determine project success, right? If we need to end the project, what are the conditions to be met in order to close or cancel the project or phase, right? Assign the project manager responsibility and authority level is part of it. The name and authority of the sponsor or other persons authorized in the project charter. At a high level, the project charter ensures a common understanding by the stakeholders of the key deliverables, milestones, and the roles and responsibilities of everyone involved in the project. So this is what makes up a project charter. This is what makes up the project charter. So it provides enough information for you to go into detailed planning. Let me more or less dissect the project charter a little bit. So if you look at the project purpose, the measurable project objectives, and high-level requirements, high-level project description, this first four is actually addressing scope on a high level. Then, of course, this is addressing risk. This is addressing schedule. This is addressing budget or cost. And this also talks about stakeholders, right? So you can see that scope, time, cost, risk, stakeholders essentially will be documented as part of the project charter. You can see it. And then you can now start building up and do more detailed plans in those areas, right? So that's why the project charter is an important document for a project manager, because some information that you need as a project manager will already be there. So that's why we develop it, and it takes time. It's a process. You have several meetings, you discuss. Some people say, no, this doesn't align with our expectations. This. Oh, okay, how? So it takes time to develop these things. That's why it's a process. It takes time to ask questions and ask experts and itemize the high level risk. It takes time to know the expected milestone completion date. So that's why we have meetings. Yeah, talking to different people to be able to get this information. And that's what we're talking about. Okay, so let me pause so that I can fetch a project charter template. So give me a sec. Okay, so let's look at the project charter. This is a template. So so when you get to let's say you're working in an organization as a project charter, as a project manager, I said as a project charter. When you're working in the organization as a project manager, right? If you need any document go to the PMO or ask other project managers, please, do you have a template on this? It doesn't mean you don't know your job. It simply means you don't want to reinvent the wheel. They will give you, right? It's not bad, especially when you're new in the organization. Please, I need the project charter template. If they have, they'll give you. If they don't have, you can create. And thank God, in the era of AI, creating documents now is not very difficult. It's just that you might need to customize, get feedback on the document, and you might want to put personal touches so that it doesn't sound like AI. So a project charter is something you can create. In fact, using artificial intelligence, and I want you to do this, look for an area, a project that you like to more or less maybe work in, or just maybe you can make up a project, attach this document to AI. You can attach files, and then say and tell the AI that using this template, describe a project. You don't have to give it too much information, right? And tell it to create the project charter. And of course, you see what it gives you. Most times is very, very intelligent stuff. So let's look at project chart. That means you can do that, of course. So this is a project charter, and it's a template, and you can see the table of content. Let's look at the table of content. You can see everything we talked about, the justification for the project, the high-level risk, the milestone schedule, the budget, the project deliverables, the assumptions, constraints. So this is a very good document to that explains everything we just talked about. So let me just run through the document. So the first section is the executive summary that summarizes the entire document. And the reason why this template is good is that, first of all, they'll explain this section first in green. So it explains what the executive summary is. And then afterwards, they give you an example of what an executive summary should look like. So here it says, for the past several years, our company intranet has been subject to numerous external breaches because of poor information technology security measures. These incidents have resulted in approximately $10 million in damages to the company. The Intranet Security Assurance Project has been created to address and correct these security issues and prevent further loss due to external IT security breaches. The project will integrate improved technology solutions with our current platform in order to establish a more robust security infrastructure. So you already have an idea of what the project is. Let's look at the business case and justification. The ISA project has been created to increase organizational IT security in order to prevent further financial damages, which means the organization has lost money because of those breaches. The costs associated with the successful design and implementation of these security measures will be recovered as a result of the anticipated reduction in financial damages. So we have the business objectives, and this is actually where we got the 90 days and 120 days business objective. We have the project objectives, and you've seen this before. Yeah, they should be part of the business case. We have the high-level requirements. The project must meet the following list of requirements in order to achieve success. The solution must be tested in the IT lab. Prior to deployment, solution must be implemented without disruption. Then constraints. The following constraints pertain to the ISA project. All security hardware and software must be compatible with our current IT platform. All hardware and software must be purchased in accordance with the allowed budget and timeline. 2 IT specialists and 1 security specialist will be provided as resources. Assumptions, you list the assumptions. The preliminary scope statement is more or less describing the scope of the project. The high-level risk, right? That's where we identify some risk in the project. So potential disruption to operations during solution deployment, external threats breaching intranet security through new methods. Those are the high-level risk. Then the deliverables, what are we going to hand over? The fully deployed intranet security solution, technical documentation, and recommendation for future security considerations. Milestone schedule, the milestone dates when certain things are expected to have been completed is there. And then the high-level budget is also part of your project charter and approval requirements, right? This is where we talked about how we define success, what success means, and what must be involved for us to approve the project. Let's read this one. Success for the ISA project will be achieved when a fully tested intranet security solution and all technical documentation is fully deployed throughout the company within the time and cost constraints indicated in this charter. Additionally, this measure of success must include a recommendation list for future security considerations as we fully anticipate the necessity of the solution to evolve in order to prevent future threats. Success will be determined by the project sponsor. So if you remember, we said we have to determine what success is and who determines success. That's the sponsor, who will also authorize completion of the project. Now, you also see the project manager and his authority level. Look at it. John Doe is named project manager for the duration of the ISA project. Mr. Doe's responsibility is to manage all project tasks, scheduling, and communication regarding the ISA project. His team, consisting of 2 IT specialists and 1 security specialist, will be matrix support from the IT department. Mr. Doe will coordinate all resource requirements through the IT department manager, James. No, Mr. Doe is authorized to approve all budget expenditures up to and include. So look at the part that talks about his authority. So here, so look at it. So his team, consisting of 2 IT specialists and 1 security specialist, will be matrix support from the IT department. Mr. Doe will coordinate all resource requirements through the IT department, James Doe. Mr. Doe is authorized. So you can see is what he has access to. That's usually what we refer to as authority. Who are the people he has access to? That means he can speak to these people and they will do what he or she wants. Then Mr. Doe is authorized to approve all budget expenditures up to and including the allocated budget amount. Any additional funding must be requested through the project sponsor, Jim Thomas. Mr. Doe will provide weekly updates to the project sponsor, right? And that's what we're saying. Then the project charter is signed by the sponsor. Okay.
All right, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Regarding the project manager. So you said like that document read that he is going to be a matrix support.
Yes.
And I know there are different kinds of matrix support. Now I see that he still has to go through the manager of the IT department, even though he has authority to and can authorize all the budget and all. Does that how will you define or what kind of matrix do you say that is?
Okay.
Well, because
That
it doesn't sound like weak. It's like strong, but because of that IT part, I just want to be sure.
it's a strong matrix. Well,
Okay.
how we will know it's a strong matrix is if there's a PMO. So it's not as if John Doe is has been as w- if John Doe works with the PMO, then it's a good sign that it's a strong matrix organization. But if
Mhm.
John Doe just came in for this project and afterwards is going to be leaving once the project is complete, then it might mean that it's either a balanced matrix or weak
Okay.
matrix. You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
there are other questions we need to ask. But if there's
Okay.
a PMO, right,
Mm-hmm. Okay. Strong.
it's going to be a strong matrix, right?
Okay.
And then matrix support means that it's going to use resources from IT department.
Mm-hmm.
Remember matrix structure, you have the PMO,
Yes.
and then the PMO uses resources across different units of the organization.
Department. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's what is matrix support. That's what they're
Mm-hmm.
saying. Matrix support means it has access to staff in the IT department.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it means that it can use the IT department's resources as matrix support for the project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome. All right, so this is a good time to take a break. I'm sure you'll agree. And of course, this is slightly past that 1 hour mark. So let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back and we'll run till um, maybe next 40, 50 minutes or 40 minutes as as much time as we have. So let's take a 10-minute break now. Come back in 10 minutes. And we're now going to talk about scope management. So why is it important to manage scope? In light of the triple constraints, what will happen if scope is not properly managed? What will happen if scope is not properly managed? Yes. Who's going to help me? If scope is not properly managed, what happens? Yes. What happens if scope is not properly?
I can try.
Yeah,
If
go ahead.
scope is not, yeah, if scope is not properly managed, then there will be opportunities for scope creep.
Mm-hmm.
Changes will be happening often, and it will just keep expanding the project and prolonging it. Might even spend more money in trying to get it done, and the likelihood of it, of the project succeeding would be reduced with the scope being changed consistently or being added to consistently. So that's why I believe the scope has to be properly managed.
Okay. Yes. If scope is not managed, time and cost, and time and cost is going to, we'll find it more difficult to manage time and cost and can also lead to scope creep. So thank you for that. So let's look at, um, there's a diagram I want us to look at, and I'm going to ask you a few questions on. So, um, what do you see here? So I'm going to create a red box, right? The image on the left, can you describe what you see? So so I'm going to ask both of you, but let Fisayo, we'll start with Fisayo, and we move to Shane. All right. So, Fisayo, can you describe what you see in the image on the left?
Okay, I can, from my own view, I can see a lady with a long hair.
Okay.
I say, yes.
Okay. And tell us more about the lady. Tell us, is she young? Is she old?
Okay,
Tell
okay,
us, just describe her. Describe her as,
Okay, from my own view, it looks like as if she's young. She has black hair in front.
Okay.
Then she used something, veil or something to cover her hair, but she looks like a young lady staring on, just staring to. mm. I can see her hair,
Okay.
the ears, the neck. Mm. Yes. So she has black hair.
Okay.
That's what I can
How
see.
how how old how old would you say she is if you were to
Mm,
guess?
This one, maybe 20, thereabout. Yes.
Okay. 20. Okay. Is that all you can tell us about her?
Mm, as that, okay, currently, maybe if I had more, we
Okay.
had.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Sharon, please, over to you.
So I can see this young lady as well, but I
Mm-hmm.
can also see an older woman.
You see an older woman?
Yes,
Okay.
an older woman, like looking forward. She has black hair as well. Like she
Okay.
has a scarf over her head, and then she's just looking like downwards, somewhat downwards.
How old would you say this old woman is?
So she will be like in maybe 80s.
Okay. Any other uh description for the old woman?
Uh, she doesn't look really happy.
Okay. Okay. Yes. And you don't want to dream about this old woman.
No, looks like a villain, like
So
in the
you
Beauty
just
and
do
Beauty and the Beast.
you do 3 night videos.
Looks scary.
Very scary. Okay. Yeah. Fisaya, do you see the old woman? How to check if Fisaya sees what we're saying? Fisaya, do you see the older one?
Hold on. Okay, let me see. I'm still seeing the one with the black hair, looking down. I've not seen the old one.
Okay, let me help you. Let me help
Okay.
you. Now, there's a reason we're doing this, and it's based on scope and some problems that we have with scope management. So, now, the side of the young woman, right? The entire side, see it as a big nose. And this is where the old woman breathes through. Then where the young lady's necklace is the lips of the old woman, black lips. Then the old woman has a long jaw, long chin. And this is the left eye of the old woman, and this is the right eye of the old woman. It's as if the old woman is actually looking at us or looking down. Do you see the old woman now?
Okay, I'm trying to get a picture.
Okay. If
Yes.
you can see the different parts, I'm highlighting, you see the older one. So this is her lips. She has thin lips, right? This whole structure is her big nose. She has a very big, massive nose. This is her chin.
Mm,
Can you see her chin? She has
yes, I
this
understand
sharp
now.
chin. Mhm.
Yes,
That
yes, yes.
that's why we're saying that you shouldn't dream of this kind of woman, right?
Just scary.
She's scary. She looks scary.
Yeah.
Now, so why did I bring this exercise up? Now, imagine that, you know, when we, let's say you and both of you saw this woman but you saw the different aspects of the woman. And just imagine that Sean did not see the younger woman. She saw the older woman at first. And you're talking about the same woman. And, you know, Fisaya says, oh, that woman, I'm sure she must be quite pretty, right? Judging from a side view, you just guess she might be a pretty woman. And Sean seeing the old woman says, what do you mean pretty? Are you sure yeah, that woman pretty? You know, the old woman is quite ugly, right? I don't understand. And it is when you get to the middle of of your conversation, you just realize you're talking about two different things. That happens on projects, right? And that is one of the things you need to manage in terms of scope, what your stakeholders are saying or they are talking about in your project. If not, you'll find out that you've had meetings with stakeholders, you've gone to execute, and what you've created doesn't meet their expectations. It happens because where your stakeholders are saying something, but we're seeing something else. Now, if you Google scope creep online, you most likely see an image like this. And let's look at it, let's study it frame by frame. Now, look at how the customer explained it. This is what the customer explained they needed, right? Now, look at how the project leader or project manager understood it. Right from the project manager, they started getting it wrong. Look at how the business analyst designed it. It's not even functional. Look at how the programmer wrote it. Look at how the business consultant described it using big grammar that some people don't understand. Look at how the project was documented, little or no documentation. What operations were installed, how the customer was billed. Now, this is hilarious. Customer was billed a lot of money, and how it was supported. But look at what the customer really needed. Look at what the customer really needed. So how do we get from here, what the customer explained, to here, what the customer really needed, and to also ensure that all stakeholders are seeing the same thing? This is one of the things you need to do when it comes to scope management, ensuring that everybody can agree on a unified scope that represents every view. Because people will always see things from different perspectives. And you don't want to work on a project where you are thinking your client is on the same page with you until you now get to the project site and the client is saying, no, this is not what I wanted. Scope management is a big deal, right? You know, and this happens, like, for example, in construction, when the architect, now it's better. Before, in construction, you just see 2D and the plan, elevation plan, side view. Now, it's possible that an architect has designed a house. The client agrees only for them to get to site, and the client is saying, no, I didn't notice what you are designing. That is also part of scope management. So how do we get a unified view about the project? Because if we don't get it right in documenting scope of the project or in ensuring that all stakeholders are seeing the same thing, we're going to have scope problems. And that is why we did that exercise. So that's part of our job. Now, we have So we've started looking at the 49 processes now, and we've jumped to the scope knowledge area. So in the scope knowledge area, we have plan scope management, collect requirements, define scope, create WBS, validate scope, and control scope. So there are 6 processes, and we will look at them one after the other, starting with plan scope management. But before we look at plan scope management, we're going to talk about some key concepts. Now, we have 2 definitions that we want to look at. The first one is called product scope, and this refers to the features and functionality that characterize a product, service, or result. The features or functionality that characterize a product, service, or results. Project scope, the work performed to deliver the product, service, or result. So when we say product scope, let me give you an example of a product scope. So iPhone 17 Pro Max, right? If you look at the features and functionality, maybe you're looking at a product review, and in that product review, they've stated the features and functionality of iPhone 17 Pro Max. That is what we call the product scope. The features, what it can do, the functionality, what it can do, the features and functionality, it defines the product scope. Let me give another example. So if you're building a hotel and you want to define the product scope, you're going to describe the features and functionality of that hotel, the facilities they have. They have a swimming pool, they have elevators, they have jacuzzis in their room. That's also part of product scope. But when it comes to project scope is the definition of the work to be done to create that product, service, or result. So in the case of the hotel, the product scope will be the designing and construction of the hotel, because that's the work you need to do to build an hotel. The designing, installation, and construction of the hotel's facilities, right? That will be the project scope. So the work we do, the description of the work that needs to be done is called the project scope. The description of the product is called the product scope. Now, completion of the project scope is measured against the project management plan, and completion of the product scope is measured against the product requirements. Now, why do we have this statement? So what is your project management plan? Your project management plan is the plan of the work we need to do, right? So project scope is benchmarked against the plan of the work. So our project management plan, scheduling, what are we scheduling? We're scheduling the work. Budgeting, what are we budgeting? We're budgeting the work to be done, the cost of the work to be done, right? So the project management plan is actually a plan of the work of the project. So we can evaluate the project scope based on the project management plan. Now, the product scope is actually determined through product requirements, right? What does the customer say they need in the product? And that the product requirements define the product scope. Now, when it comes to scope management, it can span between predictive and adaptive life cycles. What do we mean by predictive and adaptive life cycles? So when we talk about predictive life cycle, of course, this is waterfall. If you're doing scope management, you're going to end up creating what we call a work breakdown structure, WBS. If your project is adaptive, or what we can call agile, follows an agile life cycle, you're going to end up in the product backlog management. So you're going to have the product backlog. So this is a cue. Anytime you see a question in maybe the PMP exam that is talking about the WBS, you should know immediately they're talking about scope management from the waterfall aspect. But if you see project PMP question where they are talking about a product backlog, just immediately know that they are doing scope management from the perspective of adaptive or agile life cycles. Okay. Now, the way I've designed this course is that we're going to focus on waterfall and do everything about waterfall before we go into agile. So we're not going to talk about product backlog until I've finished everything to do about waterfall. Now, why am I using that, the technique or this method? It's because I want you to have a clear distinction between waterfall and agile. So I take them one after the other. And by the time we finish waterfall, you'll be able to appreciate agile better. So I'm not going to take them side by side. I'm going to take them one after the other. So please note, that's the plan. Okay. So that means that following my approach, we're only going to talk about the WBS for now. And then later on, we'll introduce agile and what product backlog means. All right, so let's go into the first process, which is plan scope management. The goal of plan scope management is to determine how the scope of the project will be defined, how we're going to create a scope statement, how we're going to develop the work breakdown structure, how we're going to monitor and control scope changes, and also approving the scope of the project. So we start with a plan, right? We start with how all these things will be done, who's going to be responsible, who's going to play what role in terms of scope management. Your scope management plan can also include which stakeholders in your project or team members can also make scope changes. So the rule book about scope management is created in this process. The main advantage of this process is that it provides guidance and direction for managing scope throughout the project. And it starts with the review of the project charter. So scope management starts from information that has already been created in the project charter. So we reference the project charter to create the scope management plan. So that's why you see the project charter as the first input. So we look at the project charter, the project description, the key deliverables, and so on, listed in project charter, and start from there. Now, the quality management plan will influence your scope management plan. Why? The quality management plan determines the standards of the project. So, take for example, in Alberta, when it comes to construction or road construction, the quality standard is that the asphalt should be 10 mm. There must be 10 mm thickness. Now, that 10 mm thickness is also describing the work, the scope of work. So your quality standards, which we get from the quality management plan, also influences the scope of work in our project. The project lifecycle description. describes the phases of our project. The project lifecycle description describes the different phases of the project. Now, we have developmental approach. Now, developmental approach is what we talked about yesterday. Developmental approach is the considerations that we take in deciding whether the project should be waterfall, agile, or hybrid. So that means that before you start scope planning, we would have determined the approach, right? Because it makes sense, because if we know the approach, then we know whether scope planning is going to eventually lead to us creating a work breakdown structure, or whether scope planning will lead us to creating the product backlog, right? So the developmental approach is important. Now, let me just talk a little bit about developmental approach. We started yesterday, of course, where we talked about if your project is more of something that represents a tangible product, is likely going to be waterfall. And we said if your project is based on knowledge work, where they're going to create software or services, so we started talking about how to differentiate between waterfall and agile. So let me add some more explanation on developmental approach. So let's look at waterfall. Waterfall is also known as, or let me start with stating the industry comes from. The waterfall is actually based on the construction industry, right? That's where it comes from. And, waterfall is also known as traditional, is also known as plan-driven, is also known as, let me just, predictive. And you can also call it sequential, because waterfall is based on sequential phases. Sequential. Now, on the other hand, we have agile, that we can also call agile, is also known as let me say iterative, agile, iterative. Agile is also known as change-driven. Agile is also known as adaptive. And agile is also known as incremental. And we said that agile is from the software industry, right? So at times, the industry that we're in can actually spell out the approach we're going to take for the project. Now, let me also explain one of the core differences between waterfall and agile. Now, we've seen a triple constraint, but I want to draw the triple constraint in a different way. So just imagine, right? Okay, so this is waterfall, and this is agile. Now, the tops are fixed. So what it means is in waterfall, scope is determined first, and you must totally define scope before you determine time and cost. But in Agile, time is fixed and budget is fixed. And we use time and cost to determine scope. That's the fundamental difference between waterfall and Agile. This diagram is the fundamental difference between waterfall and Agile. So when we look at waterfall, scope has to be determined fully. That's what we mean that scope is fixed. That means we will not stop gathering requirements until we have until all stakeholders say that yes, this is exactly what we want. Then we go ahead to schedule and budget and execute the project. So in waterfall, scope has to be known to the fullest or to a very high degree before we start the project. In Agile, our emphasis is not on scope, our emphasis is on time, which means in Agile, we focus on doing things on time. And that's what we call time boxing. So in Agile, we have a fixed time. In Agile, we can call them sprints or iterations. In Agile, some organizations use 2 weeks as a fixed iteration, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. It's usually between 2 to 4 weeks. And within that fixed time, the developers will ask, what can we achieve in the first 2 to 4 weeks? And that forms the scope of work. Now, so what's the advantage or disadvantage of using each method? So the challenge with waterfall is that nothing is going to be built until you've completely gathered all the requirements. So until the scope is certain and fixed, we're not going to start the project. The challenge with this is that it often takes time to scope a project. So scope can actually cause delays because you first of all spend time scoping a project and then, execute it. But in Agile, we can limit the scope of work we do based on the time. Now, let me give an example. So let's say that you want to build a website for your organization. And of course, that usually will have a lot of web pages, and each page will have to be relevant to what your organization is doing. So you're going to be asking different stakeholders what you should include in the website. And that can take you from weeks to a month or months, just gathering requirements, having meetings, discussing with stakeholders. It can take you from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, depending on the size and complexity of the website you want to build. And that means we're not going to execute the project until scope is known to the fullest. But in Agile is about speed. We ask ourselves, what can we achieve in 2 weeks? So in the website project, your Agile team will say, look, let's start with the homepage and scope out the homepage and build the homepage in 2 weeks. The next 2 weeks, they'll now look at the portion of scope they can work on, define it, maybe spend 1 day doing scope definition, and then using the remaining 9 days, if it's a 2-week project, 2 weeks iteration, and then build what you can. So in Agile, you are scoping and building at the same time. In waterfall, we spend all the time we need to scope before we execute. Now, why does this work for waterfall? Look at where it's coming from, construction. In construction, making changes is expensive. if you're using concrete. Making changes is not like software, where if you want to make a change, you just delete and the functionality is not there again. In construction, making changes means that you are going to pull down 2 or 3 walls or a concrete pillar, which costs a lot of money. So this is why we don't mind spending time scoping out the project, because changes are expensive in construction. So you can see that waterfall is actually good based on the industry it's for. Agile is good when you want to do things very fast and you don't want to spend all the time scoping your project so you can start. So look at the two approaches. You want to build a website. You are asking stakeholders requirements. Okay, what is going to be the color? What's your brand color? What colors do you want in a website? Okay, what pages do you want? What should About Us have? What should our products be? How do you want it displayed? All these things takes time to scope out. And they're now asking several questions, right? And it takes you 3 to 4 weeks to just scope out the project. Unlike Agile, where in the first 2 weeks you're already seeing the homepage. They've already built it. Why? Because they did not try to scope the entire project. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Please, can I get a feedback? I hope you understand what we're saying for Agile. Yeah, thank you, Sean. You don't have to scope the entire project to start it. Just scope a small portion and start with that. Right. Now, so I want to ask a few questions before we wrap today's session up. So let's say that you're working on a project where there's some uncertainty as regarding the scope of the project. Which approach should we use? You're working on a project, but there's some uncertainty as regarding or complexity because of some unknown areas of the project. Which approach should you use to manage that project? Waterfall or Agile? You're working on a project and it's complex because there are uncertainties in some areas of the project. Which approach do you think is best if you must start the project? Which approach? Messiah and Cheryl, what do you guys think? What do you think?
I would say, I don't know, because in waterfall it has to be predictive. So in agile, it's adaptive, and we can do it incrementally as we begin to understand it better.
Aha.
So I would say agile.
Yes. That means we start working with those parts we know. And then as it becomes clear to us, we work incrementally. And as we are building, it's becoming clearer to us. That is the best approach. So let's imagine that a client comes up with this kind of project where they're not 100% sure of what they want, they understand some parts, and then you decide to use Agile for them, right? And then you've completed the project, right? You complete the project, and then another client says that what you've built, I want the exact same thing. The exact same thing. How would you go about the second project? Would you use Agile or would you use Waterfall? Would you use Agile or would you use Waterfall? I want Fisayo to answer this. Yes, I must hear your voice. Fisayo, which approach will you use?
Um, But I'll try. Since it's exactly the same thing,
Yeah.
uh, I'll use waterfall.
Why are you using waterfall? I want you to be sure you know what.
Okay, because with Agile is a bit it's more flexible kind of.
Mhm.
Since I have a plan on ground, something that I can just imitate, replicate. So there's really
Mhm.
no thing adjusting, removing, things like that. So I have a template already. So it's easy to replicate for me. So I
Yes.
think we'll go with it.
So waterfall is good when scope is well known. When scope is well known, waterfall might actually be better. So in the first project, we use agile because scope was there were some areas of uncertainty in scope. So we started with areas we knew, and then we gradually built the project. Waterfall is used when scope is well known, can be determined, and especially when not so much constraint, you can use waterfall. Last question before we go. If you are trying to manage uh, your budget, which approach is best for your project? If you're trying to, you have a fixed budget for a project and you want to, you're very, very conscious about cost. Which approach do you think will be the best approach for your project? Who's going to help me answer? And then we call it a day, please. You have a fixed amount of money for a particular project. Which approach should you use to manage cost? Who's going to help me? Okay, sure. Yeah.
I can try. Yeah, I would say I will use Agile because just like that triangle you drew, you said
Mm.
the time and cost are already fixed. I'm just trying to now get to the scope. So if I already have a budget that is fixed, I'll just go with Agile.
Okay. 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 So which one do you think out of the two approaches it's better to manage costs? That means, you know, don't have so much money. Which one do you think would better? Yes, in Agile we say cost is fixed, right? Um, but what cost is fixed in Agile means is that you have a fixed number of developers on your project that you pay them
Okay.
a certain amount of money per iteration. The
Mhm.
money you pay them is fixed every iteration. That's what it means, right? Every 2 weeks, your developers get. So that's what cost is fixed there. But what I'm
Okay.
describing is, let's say that, you have maybe 100,000, $1 million for a project, and you're not probably likely expecting more funding, and you need to manage that fund for your project. Which approach would you use? Which approach would you use?
Well, that leads it to waterfall. And in explaining that,
Mm.
I'll say it's like we are working towards the answer in terms of cost. So while we are building the scope, we should also keep in mind that we have a fixed budget.
Yes. So we want to define the scope to ensure that our budget is enough. So
Mm.
working with a fixed scope is really good. That's why construction uses waterfall, because we don't want to make changes. Making changes will cost you more money.
Mm.
So focus on a fixed scope, define the scope, and ensure that the budget is enough for the scope and execute. Okay.
Mm.
All
Mm.
right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I know I've taken our time. I apologize.
No,
See
it's
you
okay.
tomorrow by God's special grace.